late Major General Obada, a former member of the as then Federal Commissioner for Works and also a member of the Security. May his soul rest in peace.
I have the Honorable Ministers of Environment, Honorable Minister of Finance, who will both give brief yes, and the Minister of State Education, who presented their mandate. May I please start with the Honorable Minister of Environment.
Solid waste management is an essential part of environmental management. We all know that we generate waste every day. The quantum of which we generate is so much that without proper planning for collection, transportation, sorting, and consequently landfilling where necessary would be enormous. But thank God, today we are dealing with a concept that is called circular economy. We are looking at reducing waste. We are looking at reusing, recycling, repair, and reduction. Now, why National Solid Waste Management policy? Because it will provide a framework for a comprehensive, integrated solid waste management in which the federal, the state, local government, MDAs, institutions, NGOs will all be part of this. This is something that needs a coordinated effort and will provide, among other things, one, good quality environment, which will mean healthier people, will provide jobs because we will have this waste is no longer waste, it's now resources. We consider it a resource because you can reuse, you can recycle, you can do all that. Ultimately, the one that you cannot even, the rubbish, the garbage, can be turned into other things. Like we have plastic recycling plant right here next to us in Karu. What we do with that, we take these plastics, whether it's pure water, leather, where is the bottles, whatever it is, as long as it's plastic, we take it to that plant. It's washed, it's run through the system, it's melted and turned into pellets. This pellet can be used to produce interlocks, briquette, and so many other things. So it's no longer waste, but rather a resource. So that is why we need this comprehensive solid waste management plan, which the federal government has graciously, the Federal Executive Council has approved. Now, what is left is to have the implementation. And this implementation will require the input of everybody, the federal government, the state, the local government. And solid waste management, we all know, or for those of us that don't know, is on the concurrent list, meaning federal government can make laws, state government can make laws, local government can make bylaws. Now, constitutionally, local governments are the ones that are responsible for solid waste management. However, we all know the capacity of local government. They don't have quite that capacity to do so. It's something that they usually collaborate with state. The federal government will provide the framework and all the support necessary to undertake this management that is comprehensive. It was put together by UNIDO and the Federal Ministry of Environment. Kaduna State Government was part of that, and some other state that participated in putting this document together, which today got approval as a national policy. Under that, you have categorization of different waste, whether it's hospital waste, whether it's electronic waste, whether it's just conventional waste, commercial. All this will come under the integrated management of the solid waste. But importantly, what I want to stress is that with this, we will have a lot of jobs being created from the recycling plant that we are building. We'll also be inviting the private sector to come and invest in this, like the ones that we have built and handed over to the community. We have built one, I just mentioned, in Karu. There is one in Kogi, Lokoja. There is one in Boko, Benue. There is one in Kwara. There's another one, two of them in Kwara actually. We have a metal scrap recycling plant in Rivers, that's in Port Harcourt. All of these are sources of creating wealth, from waste to wealth, and sources of jobs. So not only it will provide the environmental quality, but also the economic improvement and the livelihood of the people. We have another one in Anambra State. We have in Ekiti, in Adamawa. There are so many of this that the Federal Ministry of Education, of Environment, is building and handing over, and at the same time collaborating the state and private sector to operate this way. So very soon you will see probably state competing to get waste from different sources, because it's no longer a menace if managed properly, but rather a resource that can create employment, can create wealth, and so many other things, and provide good livelihood and good quality environment. Thank you.
The Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning presented to the Federal Executive Council for approval the 2021 to 2023 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy paper. Like you know, for the very first time since this current democracy, we've had a budget cycle now running from January to December with the 2020 budget. And we felt that this needs to be sustained. And so in our calendar, to ensure the sustainability of this cycle, we have had to bring this MTEF FSP to the Federal Executive Council so that we can get it on time to the National Assembly for passage before we bring in our budget proposals in September. This is just to ensure that we are able to maintain that cycle. Like you know, the MTEF FSP describes the federal government's socio-economic and developmental objectives and priorities for the period under review. We have had to have a wide engagement with critical stakeholders in developing this MTEF FSP, and we have taken their inputs into the document that we presented to FEC today. These stakeholders are the National Economic Council, which is made up of governors, civil society organizations, and the public. That we did through a webinar that was widely received and with good participation, not only in Nigeria, but Nigerians from Europe and America joined in and made their contribution. Last week, we also met with the National Assembly with a view to getting some of their inputs. We spoke about the key parameters for the 2021 to 2023 medium-term fiscal framework, and the assumptions that we made are based on these following parameters. Oil price benchmark of $40 per barrel, oil production at 1.86 million barrels per day, an exchange rate regime of 360 naira per dollar. Inflation we projected for 11.95%. The non-oil GDP at 132 trillion. Oil GDP at 10.1, a nominal GDP at 142, and projected GDP growth rate for 2021 at 3%. For the first time in doing this, we had to review the global outlook And just for the very first time in a very long while, all regions of the world are projected to experience negative growth in 2020. Although there are substantial differences across the individual countries, but only China is showing a 1% projected GDP growth. So based on these assumptions, we came up with the parameters that was presented to the Federal Executive Council today. So going by this MTF FSP, it is projected that in 2021 might have a budget size of about 12.66 trillion, and this will also trend in 2022 and 2023. Because of the pandemic and the implications of it, and the fiscal space where we don't have a lot of buffers, there might be need for some additional borrowing going forward. For the first time, we're bringing in more GOEs. Last time we had the 2020 budget, we brought in 10 GOEs. This time we are bringing in 63 GOEs into the budget so that we have a true national outlook of what our budget will look like. And we had the approval of the Federal Executive Council to proceed with the MTF, and then soon, Mr. President, we communicate with the National Assembly with the details of the MTF. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the proceedings out of Council in respect of the Ministry of Education's memo. We submitted a memo on behalf of the University of Benin for the procurement, installation, and commissioning of theater seats, computers for work in the auditorium at the University of Benin, which is being funded from the 2019 TED Fund allocations to that school in the sum of 136 million naira. The contract, as proposed by University of Benin, was approved by Council, and they will now proceed with the procurement. Thank you.
Today, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development presented to Council the Ministerial Performance Report of the Ministry. You may be aware that this is an exercise that has been ongoing for a couple of months now, and today we're able to present our own performance report. In that report, we have outlined the agencies under the ministry and programs. We have also highlighted the programs that the ministry is handling, especially the National Social Investment Programs. We have also highlighted our key performance report, which shows the 7 ministerial mandates that was given to us by the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and we have tied all these ministerial mandates to our key performance indicators. We have outlined our achievements, our challenges, as well as our recommendations and prayers to Council. So far, this is what we've been able to do with a very, given a very short period of time, we're able to present the document to Council. Thank you very much. National Homegrown School Feeding Program, we want to know how far. You may recall that during the lockdown, Mr. President directed that we should have discussions with the state governments, the governors, to identify the best model that we use in continuing the program. And this we did by identifying the model of taking the dry home food ration to the families or to the homes of these children. We have successfully done that in FCT, Lagos, and Ogun State. Discussions are still ongoing with the remaining states to see how we can continue with this program. We were thinking that schools will reopen before now, but now that schools are not going to reopen, we have opened up the discussions with the state governors. And on the issue of our key achievements, one of our really key achievements is the fact that we've been able to carry out interventions timely and promptly. Interventions in areas of either disasters when they occur, we respond immediately, or even interventions in the areas of the palliatives that we have distributed during the COVID-19 lockdown. I'm happy to inform you that we've been able to take all these interventions to the affected state as directed. And I want to also say that, yes, we have challenges, one of which is inadequate funding. It may surprise you to know that we were really challenged by that. And also we have issues of structural issues in the ministry, especially the issue of office accommodation is a challenge which we highlighted today. We also have the challenge of the states really, living up to their expectations of meeting up with the MOUs that we signed with them in some of the programs. We have quite a number of challenges which we highlighted. And then our key achievements, I mentioned, we've been able to give the timely response to these emergencies. And we've been able to put in place a structure, given the period that we have come on board. We are barely 1 year old, but I'm happy to inform you that we now have a full-fledged ministry on ground, with all the agencies and the programs under the ministry being very well coordinated. And we have also been able to carry out the directives by Mr. President in the area of the JIP moratorium, that we are asked to give the 3 months moratorium to the JIP beneficiaries. We have also expanded the National Social Register by 1 million, which also was a directive by Mr. President. We have also been able to deploy the grains from the strategic grains reserves to the first lockdown states by the federal government and other frontline states, and many other achievements that the ministry have recorded under the period in the period under review. And the question around, I've been quoted to have said that only people who recharge their phones with 100 naira and below, or people that have 5,000 naira in their account. Well, this is a decision that we have come to. It was a collective decision, because what we have in the National Social Register is a well-structured program of the national cash transfer, where communities are involved to identify the poor and the vulnerable households. But for the purpose of this COVID-19, we felt that people have become affected by the lockdown, and they have become poor, especially people who depend on daily wage to earn a living. So a decision was reached that, okay, these people, since now we're going to capture the urban poor, we will look at those criteria of people who top up their cards with 100 naira and below, and then people who have less than 5,000 naira in their accounts for a period of 3 months. This is what we're trying to use to target these people who have become poor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And on the issue of the 25% of the population being targeted as people that we give intervention, especially in the area of the food distribution. Yes, these are people that have been identified by the Poverty Mapping Index that have gone above the 7 decile of poor and vulnerable. And in every state, we said, okay, 25% of the population of that state is being targeted as people who will give these palliatives to. This is a structured arrangement, and it is guided by the principles of the poverty mapping index, and that is what we have done. I think I have answered the questions. Thank you very much.
We were also able to present the mandate report of the Ministry of Education. The explanations in respect of the mandate areas were provided in our short work plan to the government. Government and the Federal Executive Council reviewed our activities in the sector, private, from basic education through to tertiary education. What we're doing with teacher development, what we're doing with infrastructure development, what we're doing with a program for out-of-school children, our collaborations with the various ministries and agencies around the world, and updated council on what our future plans are to be as we progress. So council will now reevaluate and at a further engagement, then decide how well all the mandates have been performed and what gaps need to be filled in this.
Revenue for 2021 would be
Gross domestic product. GDP. He wants to know what is GDP.
okay. I will speak to that because GDP flows from some things. Yes, I spoke about the various assumptions that have been made, which in terms of parameters. And those assumptions are what drives the revenue that we get. And then in terms of how you are able to reflect the economy as spent, it helps your GDP. For Nigeria, it was projected that by the end of this year, we should have a GDP of minus 4.41%. However, with the stimulus, if properly done and executed, we expect that the GDP would improve to about a negative 1.8%. So in terms of revenue projections, for 2020 it was 5.84 trillion, but for 2021 we expect that it will be 7.50 trillion. Even though the oil production is much lower than our capacity, because we are restricted by the OPEC plus quota in order to get the pricing high, we have brought in 63 GOEs, which are the government-owned enterprises. And by bringing them into the budget, we're able to shore up revenues by an additional 2.17 trillion into the budget. Hence, you are seeing we are projecting a larger budget size for 2021 over and above the 10.8 trillion for the revised 2020. Yes, when you look at the 7.5 trillion and the expectation to spend about 12 trillion, there's definitely a gap. And that gap has to be financed. Is there a plan for borrowing repayment? Yes, there is. Even in 2020 budget, we have provisions to repay debt. In the 2021, there is also those provisions to repay debt. We have a sinking fund. So we look at the ratios and ensure that we are able to pay our debts. Of course, that's why we have the Debt Management Office to run those numbers and advise us. Thank you.
I think the two questions are related. One is to find out if there's been any change from what the Honorable Minister said last week, and whether we're still meeting with parents over that. Actually, that's what answers that first question. We're still meeting with parents over that. What the Minister said reflects the true position of the Ministry. We are not confident yet that everywhere is safe. The numbers from NCDC are still very alarming, and we had put this in front of parents and all the stakeholders in the Ministry, in the education ecosystem. We are still meeting with them. In fact, there's a stakeholder meeting convened for Monday. WAEC, on its own part, is also negotiating with other West African countries to look at possible shifts in dates. Once they are through with that meeting, and hopefully when we're through with the consultations with the stakeholders, if there's any change in the Ministry's position, we'll communicate. But as it stands, the position of the Honorable Minister, as communicated to you last week, remains the position of the Ministry until further evidence to the contrary or further agreements that may alter those then arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.